Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Behind me, 2014 GTI with some carbon buildup. Pretty common on these engines, especially the 3rd gen. So we're gonna pull the manifold off, get her all cleaned up the best we can, and put her back together. Pop our engine cover off, should be held on just with grommets. Sometimes they can get a little sticky, but we'll just pull up. Now when we put it back together, we'll throw a little lubricant in each of these little grommet holes. It'll come off easier in the future. Now we're just gonna work from this side on over. We have some coolant passages here, T30. And then one right here in front of the manifold is another T30. All right, now it's free to move out of the way. We'll pop this hose off. This is a fuel line hose. Let's pull it up, and then we'll pull off our oil filter. Maybe. And then we'll just drape a towel over the top of this so we don't get any debris inside. Got this hose up here. And then these electrical connectors we can pop off. One there, one right here, and then one more for the throttle body. Okay, push that down and out of the way. Pull off our throttle body boot. It's a flathead or a 7mm. Just enough to break the seal. Then we'll get an angled pick and put that in between the boot and the throttle body. Just very carefully peel it away. Give it a little more slack. All right, now that should separate as we lift the manifold up. Let's keep working over. We got this here. You just pinch the 2 ends. That should come out. Do this up here too. There we go. You just pinch this like that and it comes off. We got a 10 mil here. And that's out of the way. And there's a little clip here holding it on to the fuel rail. Get moved out of the way. Pop this up the rest of the way. Got this electrical connector up here. That goes under. Let me move you just a smidge as we're working over. We got another little hose to disconnect here. It's the same style as our PCV hose. Just pinch the top and bottom and it should slide out. There we go. Got it. Okay, now this can just be moved out of the way. Next, we're gonna remove our ducting here. It's easiest just to take off the whole air filter housing. So we'll unplug it, a little hose here, unplug this connector up here. Sometimes these connectors are just easier to get to with a pick. There we go. We'll pull this up. Looks like they got a little stereo system installed. Now it's a series of T25s. And we got this clamp in the back. There we go. And then we have a 5mm Allen here in this corner. It should pop up. There we go. You can pop this little cover off here. There we go. One more hose here in the bottom corner. That's just another pinch. Same as the PCV hose. You just pinch it. There's a bunch of electrical connectors right here. We don't have to disconnect the electrical connectors, but we do have to unbolt the bracket. There's 2 T30s. Okay, that whole thing is out of the way. The vacuum hose here. Pop off. Need a little tiny pick for that. Anytime you use a pick, just be careful. These are sharp and can pierce the hose. So just nice and carefully break it free. Pop it off. Let me just disconnect it from the purge itself. There we go. So instead of pulling it off the line, just pull it off the purge solenoid. Okay, this thing is out of the way. Let me just look around to see what else we need. So our fuel line does have to come off. So we're gonna pull our purge solenoid completely out. There's just another hose connected to it. We'll pull that off. It's black and red stripe. There we go. And then it should just be a little grommet that's holding it on. I'll swoop you in to show you this a little better. There we go. Just leave that dangling. Let me show you. So right there is the bracket that the purge solenoid was connected to. You just pinch the 2 ends just like a buckle on a backpack. So 2 ends, pinch them in, and the purge solenoid slides right out. And that gets us access to our fuel line underneath that we need to pull off. You'll notice on our fuel line we have 2 nuts. The top one is a 19 mil, the bottom is an 11/16. We'll just take a rag, put it underneath just to collect any of the fuel that's gonna drip. Wear safety goggles just in case we get any spray. Now we wanna hold the top one with our 19 and then break loose the bottom one. There we go. It's a little squirt, but not much. Okay. We can do the rest by hand if we can get our hand in there. I'm gonna pull this off, just a T30. I'm gonna loosen that a little more. Okay. Now we'll break the bottom one loose. Just use the same rag, might as well. Put that underneath. So same idea. All right, perfect. Now that fuel line, you can wiggle it out if you want, or it can just stay there. It'll come out with the manifold. I want to say we're pretty close to just pulling the manifold off. Let me see if there's anything else. All right, T30. And there should be 2 more T30s underneath. You have to use a 1/4 inch for these ones down here. Just use a little flashlight if you need. And then there's 2 10mm. One on that end and then one on this end. Just get a little magnet. The fuel rail stays connected to the manifold. So once we have all the bolts out, it's just a matter of pulling on it, wiggling it, and it should come off. Let me see if I can get just a little pry bar in there. There we go. It's just the seal on the injectors. Nice. Okay. So we still want our boot to our intake manifold to come off. Just pull on that. There we go. That's out. And keep pulling. Okay. Let me show you right over here. We have one more electrical connector right here for our pressure sensor. So on this side, I had an injector stay behind. So I'm just gonna disconnect the electrical connector for it. And then same in the middle. There's another one that got left behind. I'm just gonna disconnect that one. There we go. All right, up and out. Nice, we got the intake manifold off. Now each of these little runner plates, they could just come right out. They slide out just like that, nice and easy. We'll clean each of these plates off as well. We'll get a good peek inside those. Oh yeah, lots of carbon. That's probably too bright. You see in there? There's all kinds of buildup. This is cylinder number 1 over here. My video's not doing it justice. Let me take a picture with my camera. All right, now for the cleaning, we want to make sure our intake valves are closed. We don't want any of this crud to get washed into the cylinder. 24mm, we can get on the crank pulley here. If you need, you can pull the tire off and get access that way as well. But they give you just enough room for a ratchet. I believe they are all closed already. I just want to be 100% sure. So I'm gonna move it and see what happens. They are all closed. Now the intake valves are only open during the intake stroke, which makes sense. So it's pretty easy to get them all shut at the same time. Now, we're gonna take some solvent of your choice. We're gonna spray in there and let it soak. Now before I do that, I'm gonna pull these O-rings off right here, because O-rings don't like solvent sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't matter, sometimes it does. So we're just gonna pop them off to be sure. There we go, we'll put them on later. Now they make all kinds of solvents for this. I'm just using brake clean. It really doesn't matter, these are all metal parts. So it doesn't have to be plastic safe or sensor safe or anything like that. Go ahead and spray it in. Just let it soak. Get a nice little puddle in there. And if it doesn't create a puddle, it's probably because the intake valve is open a little. Okay. Now just to get the preliminary heavy stuff, we're gonna use a pick like this. I'm just gonna scrape it all off. Now this is just the boring part. That's all we're doing, is just scraping off as much as we can. I'm gonna keep doing this for our initial stage, get all of them really good the best I can, and then I'll suck them out with a little syringe, re-douse them, keep doing this until I get all the bulk off. And then we'll switch to a different method to get the fine tuning. Look at this crud we're busting just with brake clean and a pick. All that junk is now coming out. All right, end of round 1, looking a lot better. But if you can see in there, you'll notice that there's a lot of crud now that's settled to the bottom. What we wanna do is blow that out. I'll go ahead and take some pictures with my phone so you can see it a little more in detail than this camera can pick up, but not too bad. The second stage is with a drill and some zip ties. I didn't come up with this idea. I've seen somebody do it on the internet. So we'll buzz this through each of them, see how much more we can get broken off. Just get a little bit of your solvent in there just to create a small puddle at the bottom. And then we just set it in. And then put the drill in reverse to get the other side of the valve. And you just do that back and forth, forward, reverse, you're getting one side, then the other side of the valve. We'll go ahead and wipe it out. Just blow out any excess liquid. All right, the final results. Again, I'll just take a picture with my phone. But cylinder number 3 was the crustiest as far as the hardness of the carbon. It was the most crusty. Everything else had a nice gooey to it. Of course, there were crusties as well, but the majority of it was gooey. This one was the hardest caked, stuck on cylinder number 3. But the goal is to clean it out so air can flow. That's what causes our drivability issues, is that restriction in the air. All right, I'm pretty happy with the result. Wasn't quite sure how that zip tie method was going to work. You see others have results with it. Gave it a try. Awesome, I love it. So, using your screwdriver and pick just to break off the big heavy duty stuff, the crusty chunks, get those all broken free, blown out, and then polish it off with the zip ties. So, excellent. We have a new intake manifold gasket we're gonna put on. We're gonna pop off the old gasket, put on the new one, and then start buttoning it back together. The old manifold gasket, it's pretty easy. Now these are reusable. If they seem flexible and they protrude above their groove, you can reuse them. With that said, they are cheap enough just to replace. Little pick just to get a grip on it and pop it up. There you go. And the new one goes in. Can only go in one way. Can't go backwards or the other way. Just one way in. Fits right in. Nice. A few things I have to do still before I forget is put our runners back in and our O-rings over our fuel injectors. Once the O-rings are on, we're gonna coat them with a little bit of silicone paste as a lubricant. I'll do that off camera because it's pretty easy. All right, so on these 2 injectors that came out, I'm just gonna throw a tad bit of lubricant right on that seal. And this is it right here, just a little bit of silicone paste. So any brand doesn't matter, but silicone paste as a lubricant. We'll just move that around, get it spread around, perfect. Okay, here we go. Now, I did this off camera, but just wipe all your surfaces off, make sure everything's nice and clean. Now, before this goes in all the way, we do have to plug in our injectors. So the 2 that are left behind, we want to make sure we plug those in. There we go. Okay, check with a flashlight one more time. Make sure everything's plugged in. All the injectors are going in the right hole. Okay, should just slide down. We have our air boot in the front. That also has to kind of slide on at the same time. There we go. You just kind of have to move it just a little to get those injectors to fit right in their slot. First thing we're gonna plug in is our fuel rail pressure sensor, just so we have that accounted for and on. All right. Okay, let's get our fuel line back on. Then we can start plugging in all our connectors over here. We want clean engine oil as a lubricant on all our ends. That one, and then down below. We're just getting a little bit of thread started on one side and then get the thread started on the other side. I'm gonna move you just a little. We're gonna put in our bolts. You can get the bottom long bolts in from underneath right here. I bet we can do the same with our nuts. There's one, there's the other. I'm gonna suck down our 2 ends first real quick. Not all the way tight, just a little bit. Now we'll snug down our torques. All right, I'm just looking around, make sure nothing is being pinched. All right, we can go ahead and torque those down. I'll post a torque spec on the screen, and then we'll finish tightening up our fuel line. And I'll put the torque spec for the fuel line as well. And that's done in 2 stages. So the first torque, then you let it sit so you can do a few things, plug some stuff in, then you go back and double check torque. Now you might not be able to get an actual torque wrench on there, just use your best judgment getting it as close as possible. We start plugging this stuff in. Now anything that has a little O-ring on it, feel free to put a little lubricant. Doesn't hurt, just a little bit of lubricant around that seal. It'll slide on better, slide off easier in the future, and protect that seal. There we go. Got a 10 mil nut here. Put this back for our fuel rail. Now anytime you're screwing into this plastic, it's easy to strip out. So just keep that in mind. If you're not used to what your tool can put out, maybe do it by hand with a little ratchet. It's up to you. And I'm gonna put this little conglomerate of stuff back together. All right, and then we have our little purge solenoid. It had a couple little hoses attached to it too. There we go. We'll get these 2 screws back in it. Just have to reroute this, goes under. There we go, and over like this. Now all these wirings here in the front have to go up inside that little groove there, right here in this window. So we can just put that back on up here. Fuel line can go back down. I can go back on. We'll do our intake boot now before we forget. We'll plug all these electrical connectors. All right, put our oil filter on so we can move this hose a little. If you're ready for an oil change, now wouldn't be a bad time to just go ahead and change her out. Don't want to forget this clamp here. PCV hose. I think that's it. Let's look around, see what I'm missing. All right, that is it. Our intake valves are nice and clean. No special tools required, which is a nice bonus. I think my microphone died, so I'm not sure if it picked it up. We want to make sure that our fuel lines are not leaking. So just take a flashlight, peek around, make sure our fuel lines and injectors are not leaking any fuel. Other than that, take it for a good spin and you're good to go. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. See you on the next one.